Moderating this panel will be Aidan McDaniel, a 17-year-old student activist from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. He's involved in pioneering and working with many different social activism, suicide prevention, bullying prevention, and positive social norms programs. He's presented all over the country to large crowds of international communities, often as a keynote speaker. In addition to this, Aidan is a competitive swimmer in Winchester, Virginia, and a musician. And his band is called The Kids Don't Stand a Chance. So Aidan, it only works for me as a band name, actually. I guess we're still working on getting panelists here, right? Oh, here we are. Have a seat, guys. Nikki, bye. So great to have you all. All right, Aidan.
All right. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I am Aidan McDaniel. I'm super happy to be here. And we have an interesting switch now from going to from a student panel and an adult moderator to an adult panel and a student moderator. So kind of seems like we're running the world right now. I am really honored and a little bit intimidated to be talking here in front of all you guys and to be moderating the panel of people that I am because I am young and these are programs that I either use or have a lot of interaction with. So for me personally, this is really cool and a very interesting opportunity. So just so we can get acquainted with who all we're going to be talking with today, I would like the panelists just to take like 30 seconds to a minute to introduce yourself, what company you're associated with, and what you're hoping to get out of the panel today. So we'll start with Nikki.
Great. Well, thank you, Aidan. My name is Nikki Jackson Colasso, and I'm head of public policy at Instagram. And prior to Instagram, I was at Facebook for about 4 years. So other than just trying to be more eloquent than the previous panel, or at least as eloquent as the previous panel, I'm just really excited to hear from teens. I think a lot of times when we're talking about internet safety, it's a lot of adults talking about the challenges and the benefits, and there's just so much that we can learn from teens. So I thank Connect Safely for having us, and just really excited to have a nice conversation today.
Okay.
Next, going in order around the table then. All right, I'm Del Harvey. I'm from Twitter. I head up trust and safety there. I've been there over 5 years now, which is approximately forever. And I would say the thing I'm really hoping to sort of get out of this is actually just I think it's actually pretty fantastic that we're getting to participate in the first U.S. installation of Safer Internet Day. Mm-hmm. I know that many of the folks around the table have done EU stuff previously, or other branches of the organization have, so it's just fantastic to get to be here at the kickoff of the U.S. version. And again, congratulations and thank you to Connect Safely for hosting this and making it happen. And also, I'm super jet lagged, flew in last night, so I take no accountability if I start rambling. Just plain.
Hi there, I'm Jamie Hill from Google, and I sit on our public affairs team working on digital literacy and citizenship, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Connect Safely. And like my first two panelists also echoed, really exciting to be here and hear more, especially from teens, about what you're doing online, the challenges and the successes that you face, and kind of encouraged to continue that conversation.
Hey everybody, I'm Glenn Coletta. I lead Xbox Live's policy and enforcement organization. I'm super happy to be here. I can't tell you how impressed I was. I was just riveted by that hour and a half. I could sit and listen to you guys all day long. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Aidan. Look forward to a great conversation. And hit me up with any questions you have.
Hey folks, I'm Joe Stanley with Tumblr, and I'm the escalated support manager over there. I would say probably what looking forward here most has already happened in the previous panel. Too often these conversations are just with adults talking about teens and bullying, and too rarely do we actually hear from people in that situation. So thank you very much. I just hope that this panel is as insightful, or at least maybe half as much as what just happened.
All right, great. Let's get started. All right, my first question, and I would like for at least, hopefully the majority of you all to answer this question, but it's just sort of a broad general question to the panel. How do you, within the parameters of your company, how do you balance entertainment and safety?
I guess I'll start it off.
Yeah, that'd be
then.
good.
So it's pretty straightforward, actually. Safety is paramount. Anytime illegal activity is happening, anytime somebody's in danger, that trumps anything else, without question, without stop. When you get to the gray area is when there are behaviors that are detrimental to people but aren't illegal, that there are no laws against in that situation. What do you do? And especially when those situations involve curtailing free speech. Now you're into a really tricky situation. And so that is really where Tumblr's trust and safety team comes in, where I'm guessing most trust and safety teams, or what they're called in various platforms, come in, is helping to navigate what is a very tricky space.
I would say that I don't think that safety and entertainment are necessarily, a zero-sum game here. It's not as though if you have all the entertainment, you have none of the safety, or vice versa. I think that and I think I've actually worked at some point with the trust and safety teams from every one of the companies up here. I think that one of the things that we try very hard to do as an industry is actually cooperate in this space, because, even though there's often the perception, oh, these are all competitors, these are all, they're going up against each other for heads, we at least work in a sort of area where it's not a competition, right? It's keeping people safe is not something where, okay, great, I kept all my users safe and you kept slightly fewer of your users safe, so I won. That's not an actual contest that is going on. Plus, we often have the same users, right? You saw how many hands stayed up earlier when people were asked, oh, do you have this account, do you have this account, do you have this account, do you have this account? I had all of them, which was a startling realization for me. But, being able to sort of talk to others in the industry about how they're approaching some of these challenges and seeing what works for them, even though we're all very different platforms in how folks use us, I think is probably one of the biggest things that we do to try to make sure that we can balance both how we use our platform, but then how we can keep people safe when they're doing stuff.
That makes sense.
Oh, good.
I was going to say that the interesting thing about working in safety at a tech company is that you have all of these great minds around you, and all they do is think about innovation and how to create cool services for people. And so what that means for us is that we can be really innovative when it comes to safety. So for instance, there is a technology that I know all of us use, and we probably talk about this amongst ourselves, called photo DNA, that allows you to immediately target an image that could be exploiting a child and pull it off of the service even before it gets uploaded. And that's something that has come from innovation. It comes from taking the best minds and applying their thoughts to safety, just like we do to filters on Instagram or your news feed or whatever that is. And so I think that's a really cool part of working at a tech company. And again, as I think Del was saying, it's not so much a balance, it's just very fluid. People will only use our services, truly, if they feel safe using them. So in addition to wanting to keep people safe, it's the best thing for our business for people to feel comfortable using our platforms. If they don't, they'll stop using them. So.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about gaming. So people come to our service, they provide some money and a lot of their time and effort and passion to get into a multiplayer scenario where they get a chance to go out and play against the world, right? I mean, that's the draw of it. That's why people love it. That's why you have millions and millions of users, right? So that drives a tremendous amount of passion. Let's think about how that equation works. We take mostly young people, we put them in a semi-anonymized or even fully anonymized setting where they can talk dynamically really without filters or without anything like that. We put in video games and we add a dose of competition. What comes out the other side of that? A lot of great stuff, a lot of great experiences, but there's also some risk there. So one of the things we try to do is we try to set very reasonable and very clear expectations, try to be very transparent about that. So your idea of fun, where you're talking with your friends or even with somebody you've never met before, maybe a certain level of, like sort of conversations, we kind of put some parameters around those type of conversations. So if it's gameplay related and you're having fun and you're a little bit edgy, that's cool. We're all for that. But if you start targeting people, if you kind of delve into the world of maybe hate speech, or you try to delve into the world where you're even kind of bullying, that's when we're going to draw some lines. And what my team does, and what we really try to do, is try to be very consistent about what some of those lines are. And it's really kind of a fascinating science. Trying to put numbers or put math to human behavior, or quantify human behavior across a big scale is both a behavioral challenge, a human challenge, and a technical challenge. It's awesome stuff.
Just to jump in here, I mean, I feel like I'm not going to be saying anything particularly new, but I would agree that it is really about collaboration. At Google, we really enjoy working with other industry leaders as well as with third parties, because it is a bit of a shared responsibility to make sure that everyone is being safe and responsible online, and that I agree that, of course, safety is paramount, that people won't be having fun, you won't be able to engage with the good parts of the internet if having a negative experience.
So kind of what I'm hearing from all of you is that the perception that entertainment and safety are somehow separate entities is incorrect, and that in order for people to feel comfortable using your product or using your service, they need to feel safe. So if people don't feel safe, then they're less apt to enjoy it or to use it in the first place. Is that correct? All right.
That's what we're operating under.
Yeah.
All right. A couple things that were brought up in some of those answers I have a question about. The first thing was trust and safety. Can someone explain what exactly that is?
Well, it's going to actually vary from company to company, and I decided I'd take the first stab at this since I head up trust and safety for Twitter. For Twitter, it's actually 5 different policy teams, all of which are working on issues that are either tied to user rights or user trust or stuff where there's, some sort of user abuse or legal risk. Most trust and safety teams are handling similar issues, though sometimes my folks, for example, handle government requests and law enforcement requests. Not all trust and safety teams do that. Sometimes that's under legal. I have legal ads policy. Sometimes that's under a different section. It varies, but I think the underlying component across all trust and safety teams, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's really that sort of combined focus on user trust and user rights, making sure that people feel as though they know what they can do and what they should do and what their options are if they have something happen that they're not comfortable with.
Okay. And is that sort of just generally what that's used for, or how that's employed within the different services?
I think so. I think there are a few variations. I mean, for us, we sort of think about trust and safety across the company. So trust can be having to do with privacy. Like would someone who's using Facebook or Twitter or Tumblr or any of our services, if they're doing something, is what happened what they thought was going to happen? Would a reasonable person expect what happened to happen? And that's really tied up in trust. So when you're using privacy settings, are they easy to access? Did your information show where you thought it was going to show? It has to do with data security. When you post something, is your data safe? Is it secure? And then also just safety. Do you have reporting mechanisms? That kind of stuff. But I think there's sort of these general themes that run across trust and safety, regardless of how we operationalize those things at every company. It really is about covering a pretty wide space.
So it has to do with the relationship between the service and the consumer. It seems the trust that the consumer or the audience has in the service that they're using.
Yeah, I think for Microsoft, we care deeply about the user experience, whether it's a service or whether it's a device. And so part of our responsibility, or any service provider's responsibility, is to provide the tools. We also put a lot of effort into, educating the users. I mean, you could have the best parental controls, for example, in the world, but if nobody uses them, or the parents don't understand how to use them, or haven't had these conversations that were so well discussed in the last hour, I mean, you're kind of missing something there.
Yeah, just to second all of that pretty much. I mean, if you were to think of when people are writing in to one of us, you can pretty much group them into two large buckets. One of them is like technical problems, like this thing is not working. And then there's community problems, and it's my relationship with someone else in the system, or my relationship with my rights and my perception of what should and shouldn't be available. There's a problem there. And so that community side of it, a lot of that is really in various ways kind of handled by the trust and safety team, at least for Tumblr.
Okay. The other question, something that was brought up, was this photo DNA technology. I don't know how complicated it is, so I don't know how much time we want to spend talking on it. But can somebody give us sort of a general description of what it is or what it's used for?
I can try to give the high-level overview, and I will note that this is a simplified version of it. PhotoDNA is a technology that was actually developed by Microsoft and then donated to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. What it does is you have what is called a hash bank, but think of it as like if you were to look at a picture and take 10 little bits of that picture and just save those 10 little bits in the order that they appeared, that's a hash, okay? And it's exponentially more complicated than 10 little bits, but let's go with 10 little bits. So you have your 10 little bits of a picture. You can't see the picture anymore because it's 10 random little bits, but you still have this hash. What we can actually do is compare that little bit to photos uploaded to our platforms. And if it matches, it tells us, okay, this photo is one that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has in its database of being tied to child sexual exploitation. So it's going to be what is also often colloquially known as child pornography.
Very interesting.
So what it basically does is give us the ability to track hashes and then block that content or remove that content if it's found.
So it seems that because you all are working with services that provide or deal with such a massive audience, such a huge amount of people, that would be a tool that would be super helpful so that you didn't have to try to kind of forward the masses on your own. Although I do have a question, has there been any kickback in regards to PhotoDNA technology in regards to privacy? Just personal privacy of the users.
So I would say that when you think about PhotoDNA technology, the photos that you're identifying, you can almost think of it as each photo has like a social security number or a number associated with it. The only photos that get that number or that hash that Del was talking about are confirmed photos of child exploitative material or child pornography. So it's never the case that I'm going to upload a photo of my friends and somehow that gets mistaken and pulled off the website. It really is confirmed. So I think that I actually don't know of any false positives that have ever been generated by PhotoDNA. That's just not really how it works. But the nice thing, if you think about it, what it means is that when we identify that number, that photo never even makes it onto Facebook or Tumblr, whoever is using this technology, it never even gets there. So it's preventative, which I think is really, it's really powerful. It's something that it's really preventing the widespread dissemination of this kind of stuff that is terrible for children and just stuff that we don't want on our platform.
Absolutely.
And it's illegal,
Yeah,
right? This
right.
content is illegal. Posting this content is illegal. Other people seeing this content could actually have ramifications for them because, it could be stored in your cache or on your browser or something like that. We want to prevent that from taking place. And I think that the fact that it's run sort of algorithmically in the background, you don't have someone sitting there paging through the photos, which I can't imagine scale-wise how anyone would do that anyway. But, I think that the restriction of it to really this content type has prevented there from being much of that. I think most of us, I mean, at least for Twitter and at least some of the others here, it's primarily public. There's a lot of public content, so it's not as much of an issue.
Yeah, from a privacy perspective, just think of it as a glorified filter. It's 128 bits, but it's still a filter. And if a hash doesn't match, it goes through that filter, and the image, from a privacy perspective, the image that doesn't match, there's absolutely no impact to it. The one interesting challenge to a service like PhotoDNA is that, you know, it's actually quite old. It's been in use for many, many years, and the libraries are decades old for some of the content, which is great because it catches stuff that's even been around for a long time. But some of the challenges as the technology moves forward is that UGC, user-generated content, actually becomes more dynamic now. So the days of JPEGs going through a certain system in a finite speed with a finite network are kind of, it's still there, but the future is streaming video, the future is live broadcast video, and that doesn't lend itself, from a technical perspective, quite as easily to a PhotoDNA solution. There's a lot of variables there.
Do we have a question or a comment?
Yes, couple quick questions just about PhotoDNA. So you somewhat answered this or implied it, but it's checking against the database of previously existing photos. So when content is reported, does that database grow? Do you guys all contribute to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a little bit more.
But we'll report it.
But
Yeah.
we all report the content, even if it's not content previously matched. If we come across content that's reported to us that's not in the database, we would pass that along to.
And there's a clearinghouse that is responsible so that no one user necessarily owns that well, in fact, for sure, not one user owns that process.
And then is there, you mentioned technology, it's old and there are new technologies and videos. Is this being expanded to different forms of media or different attempts to basically get around it? And how is that being addressed?
It's an arms race, right? As things grow, as things change, we have to change and adapt as well. And that's actually, again, one of the reasons why I think it's fantastic that we have a lot of collaboration in the industry and even many companies that aren't here today, because there is a lot of conversation going on around how we can share content hashes that we come across, how we can speed up the process, how we can make it easier for stuff that's taking place across multiple platforms to be fixed as quickly as possible. There's a lot there. It's not easy, just in terms of scale or speed or any of those things, but it's definitely something that's being worked on.
It's interesting because there actually isn't, well, there is video DNA. So like in a world where there are only photos, photo DNA is great. In a world where now people are creating videos so easily on services like Instagram and Vine and others, you know, you want the kind of technology that does that against videos too. I know Google is using that technology. I think a lot of us are looking to sort of expand that technology, but you're absolutely right, it's a great question, because the pace of technology moves so quickly, and so you can never just say, oh, we're done. We have photo DNA, so we're done. I mean,
That'd be nice.
we'd all be at the job, but.
Which would be okay, actually.
Yeah, I could trade
problem.
that, yeah.
But, you know, keeping ahead of the technology and the various services out there is something, I mean, I think we're all really passionate about, but it's a lot of work.
Just to kind of hit on a pretty top line with this, I mean, that is the fundamental issue, is that, I mean, you're talking, I guess the previous panel began with like the concept of internet, and the internet's great, but the internet has these downsides. The internet just allows people to magnify their humanity in terms of like eliminating that communication barrier. And so you're going to see tremendous growth and tremendous like aspirational things that come out of the internet that couldn't have been possible before. But that also means that those darker elements that exist will be able to use those same tools. And as we continue to innovate and make new social media platforms and make it greater and easier to use these and more people get experience with them, again, you have this trade-off of, you have these great aspirational things that can now happen, but again, these darker elements can also occur. And so in the aspirational side, yes, like, well, there's a freewheeling competition between people trying to like win more followers or what have you. But this side, again, there's no competition. We're all on one team, and we are sharing the brightest minds in the industry are working together to constantly stay one step ahead.
The only other thing I'd probably add to that from a technical perspective is, you know, there are some good tools out there, and there's tons of people that aren't represented here that are just going crazy right now trying to solve some of these problems. But one of the issues you kind of have to consider when you think about that concept of UGC, right? It could be almost anything. So we traditionally tend to focus on, you know, either the pornographic stuff or things like that. But the reality is, building an algorithm or a tool to look for things like hate speech or to look for things like threats in an audio stream, that's significantly more problematic technically. It doesn't mean it can't be solved, and very smart people aren't working on those things, but you're talking about a lot more difficult problem there.
Thank you for your question. Yeah.
Oh, so I had a question about, so it seems like we're talking a lot about user to user. I wanted to know, how do you guys feel or handle if a user doesn't feel safe when it comes to their information being shared with third parties, whether that be companies and advertisements or even governments themselves, right? So then how are you protecting sort of, it's weird because everything like lives, the internet is like kind of this massive thing, but then how are you kind of protecting users' Fourth Amendment rights and things like that?
So that's great question. I'd say there's going to be a couple different answers, obviously, but the biggest thing I would say that Tumblr, I think, like the personal victory that I hold is when you sign up, you have to sign up and agree to our terms of service, and it's what everyone skips over. Like, let's be honest, it's just like everyone sees a giant wall of text and they're just like, oh no. But like in that wall of text, it's just like, here's what we're doing with your information. Here's how we're protecting it. Here's who we've agreed can see it. Like, these are very important things. Like, the more that a terms of service looks complicated, the more you need to read it because they're trying to hide something. Like, Tumblr we actually have summaries of each of the main legal sections. So even if you're not a lawyer, it's just like, here's what we're saying here. You keep all the rights to your content. Here's what we're saying here. The only person we're going to share this with is Yahoo, because Yahoo bought us. And like, that's why we're sharing it with them. We're not going to share it with other people. And we just released a transparency report along these same lines. I guess in terms of like the larger, the question there is, it's pretty incumbent on us to make it as clear as possible to you when you're signing up. You know what you're getting into.
The thing with Tumblr too that I've noticed, and I'll just interject this, is that even within the terms of service and the licensing agreements and all that, there's still some interjected senses of humor in there, and some little quips about don't do this, obviously, because that's dumb. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
I mean, we try to keep it pretty straightforward. Like, you'll enjoy reading it. I mean, that's the highest praise I can possibly think of for terms of service.
Can't put it down.
Yeah.
We did a similar thing. We made sure that our summaries could fit in a tweet, which if you've ever tried to take legal jargon and compress it into 140 characters, that's kind of a feat
incredible.
in and of itself. But,
Were your
you know.
lawyers just like pulling their hair out?
Yeah, well, you know, our privacy policy actually outlines, you know, this is what happens, this is how we handle this stuff. And I report to our GC, which is our general counsel, so I report to. No, 140 is always your limit. Yeah, it's fair. But you can do pictures now, and those are worth 1,000 words. So look at how much more. So, I mean, I think the first thing is, you know, and I actually think across the board, folks have been pushing to try to make privacy policies, rules, terms of service a lot more digestible. That's actually something that, you know, we've talked about a lot as a group, kind of in terms of best practices. Separately, I think across the board, I'm just trying to go through here mentally. Yes, I think we all have a transparency report that we publish. Google's been doing it the longest. We came in a little after them, and then I think everyone else here has done one at some point, which is by a transparency report, because it's a oddly non-clear title, given that it's a transparency report. It's a list of all of the requests for user information that we've received from law enforcement authorities, or requests to remove content from government authorities, the percentage that we complied with. It doesn't list, this is the user that they asked about, this is the, but, this is the rough number broken down by country, this is how much we complied. I know that, at Twitter, we push really hard to be able to notify users if we receive a request for their information. I believe that's mirrored here by the other companies as well. And I think that's actually something that we feel very strongly about, because we believe that our users have the right to know when their information is being requested. And then finally, the other thing, and again, I think this is also something that most of the groups here do, is respect, do not track, or let people opt out of personalization based on browsing, stuff like that. So you have, if you either are using the incognito window setting that was referred to previously, or if you've got do not track turned on in your browser, which says don't track where I'm going across multiple sites, we respect that. So that's, again, something where you, the user, have control over what of your information is collected and how.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, like, on Facebook, I don't know how many of you people use apps off of Facebook, but if you've ever connected with an app on Facebook, you get this little dialogue that it doesn't read like a privacy policy. It's like, hey, Nikki, you're giving your info to this app, and you can either choose to give all of it to them or some of it to them. You can let them post on your behalf back to Facebook or not, and it's actually really easy to use. So I do think that as an industry, the day of like the dense privacy policy, while important and important for some people, we are moving towards a realistic approach to transparency, which means speak to people so that they understand and make sure that they can reasonably expect what's going to happen to their data. And I think that goes for ads too. Ads is like a really complicated thing, because you're like, well, why am I seeing this ad targeted to me? But in general, ads are, we use sort of aggregate and anonymous data, meaning that the advertiser might know that they're sending an ad to a 25-year-old woman in San Francisco, not 25, but that's fine. But they don't know who I am or where I live. They just know that I'm a female living in San Francisco of a certain age. And so, but ads is really tricky. Ads is very complicated. I think ads is a source of real anxiety for people. And I know that all of us are really trying to help people understand how ads work, because that's how we keep our business free, right? So if we don't show ads, we could then only charge for our services. There's sort of only two ways to do it. So anyway.
There's also the occasional bonus where you just get an absolutely hilarious ad showed to you because of something that you typed or looked up. Because I remember a while back, I had jokingly typed in an email that I was planning on, that, this made me want to actually shank someone. And I proceeded to start getting ads in my sidebar about discounts on calls to prison.
Beautiful.
Which was actually awesome. I was like, well, now I know, like, if I were to follow through on this, my friends and relatives could have discount options on contacting me. So, I was more informed after that.
It seems that a lot of what we're talking about is relationship between consumer and company. And I think that's definitely something really positive for us as an audience, but also as we could see there were a lot of users in the audience. That's definitely something that, for me anyway, is really good to hear. That the people that are representing the companies are telling us that something that's really important to them is our relationship with them and how we perceive our experience with that service. And purely at a business sense, it makes a lot of sense, because if what you're keeping your consumer based off of is their how entertained they are by your product, then you want them to have a good time and you want to have a good relationship with them. But that's easy to say, and another thing entirely to take steps to build that rapport and build that relationship with them. So it definitely seems like all of the services and a lot of other services that people use are definitely working towards that territory. And I think that that's a very positive thing to be able to say, because we do in the media hear a lot of, oh, Facebook this or internet that, and everything's horrible. But in reality, it seems that there's a lot of really smart people taking a lot of really smart steps to make the internet a more positive place for their communities. Because what is internet if not just a big international community? So designing the parameters of that community to be more conducive of positivity is definitely an awesome thing to see. Yes?
Just to go back to the idea of ads, this is a question for Google, to be exact. Why did you guys chose the whole idea of personalized advertisement? Because every time I'm on Google or whatever, searching some weird stuff, I would get this random ad, and I would be like, how did they know, and stuff like that. So I just wanted to know, why did you guys chose the whole idea of personalized ad?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot, and kind of what we've been talking about on the panel, is like personalizing the experience to the user, and kind of having the control so that you know what information you're sharing with certain people or with companies or third parties. And so in a lot of like settings, you have the opportunity on the different platforms you might be using with Google specifically to go in and adjust your settings so that you know what you're sharing, whether it's through Google Plus or through ads, so that you can kind of, again, be a little bit more sure of what you're actually sharing, kind of what information you're putting out there.
Yeah, you can turn off ad personalization for Google, for Twitter, for,
If you
there's
go
a
into your
little
preference
preferences
settings,
manager.
you can go ahead and click that and adjust if you're not wanting to receive those.
But I mean, hey, I did get some pretty great information online, so.
Yeah.
Could be
And
useful.
did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to pick up on something from yesterday evening. We were fortunate enough to have Glenn and Kim from Microsoft fly in a little early, and so we had dinner, and I was talking to Glenn about the experience at the back end of Xbox Live a little bit. And this is sort of picking up on what the youth panel said about positivity. I thought I'd just ask him, so you guys know when there are patterns of bad behavior or cruelty or harassment at the back end? And he said, yeah. And I said, so Glenn, could you sort of give me some kind of ballpark percentage of people's experience, your experience with sort of bad behaving individuals? Like what percentage of your users are like that under the age of 18? And I was just wondering if you could speak to that, and maybe if others could speak to that.
Sure. So extremely low, shockingly low, actually, when you think about the number of users at any given time all around the world playing games that could be, let's face it, quite confrontational at times. I mean, if you're playing a first-person shooter or even driving Forza or whatever it may be, there's a lot of competition there. But I mean, I'm talking about really, really low percentage, like around the 1% or even lower on any given day. And so, and that's across millions and tens of millions of users. One of the bad things about that, of course, is that sometimes, even though it's very, very small, those type of things tend to bubble up because news media or whoever it may be sort of get a wind of that and then get more clicks, or the story is a little more sensational, that kind of thing. But the interesting thing is, there is, like on our service, there's a team of dedicated people, all of whom are hardcore gamers, who care deeply about the experience of our good gamers, that 99-point-something%. And so when we devise policies or devise certain tools or decide to take enforcement action, we do it with a lot of thought. We realize that these are paying customers. We want their experience to be good too. So part of the thing that we want to do is not just be punitive. We want to be positive, and we want to make people kind of maybe see the error of their ways. Don't treat people this way. When you treat people this way, this is the impact, and hopefully that will change. And so I think, by and large, we've been pretty successful.
I would say so that's something just echoing on.
Thanks. So thanks, everybody, for a lot of really insightful comments so far. I want to take it maybe a little step further. One of the things that came out of the youth panel previously was kind of the idea that a platform is kind of neutral, whether it's a school or a game or a social network, that it allows really positive, wonderful things. It allows negative things based on the user. So the question is, are there anything that you all are doing that's being designed into the platforms that would encourage or lead people more towards positive behavior? I know FOSI has done a platform for good to recognize positive behavior. And I'm curious whether your own platforms do anything to recognize or help shape positive behavior, or whether doing so would just turn people off.
I can start because we definitely at Facebook in particular, we are very interested. For the past couple years, we've been looking a lot at the idea of how you foster compassion online, because offline there are a lot of people in your life, whether it's a teacher, your church or your clergy or whomever, that are telling you about compassion and how to be kind to others. And so the idea is like, well, how do you then foster that kind of compassion online and sort of teach people how to treat each other? And one tool that we've developed is called social reporting. And it's the idea that a lot of the bullying that we see on our platform, the numbers are very, very low. But where we do see it, it's almost like friendly fire, where I can't remember, one of the panelists before was talking about somebody who said something and they really didn't mean to bully, but it came off as nasty or it hurt the other person. We see a lot of that, and most people who bully on Facebook do it one time, and once they're notified, don't do it again. But the idea of compassion, the compassion research and the social reporting flows are that if I see something that bothers me, we actually have a tool. So I'm not just reporting it to Facebook, but I can actually just send the person a direct message. It's like, hey, can you take this down? And what we see is over 80% of the time, the other person's like, oh yeah, I'll take it down. And what we're doing is we're actually looking at the way that teens speak to each other. So, and you guys probably can attest to this, but like a 13-year-old speaks very differently than an 18-year-old. And so when you're designing things into your platform, you should actually speak to teens the way that they speak to each other. So rather than using very formal language that sort of comes across as very corporate, write it in the way a person would actually talk to each other and tailor that for the person that's reporting. So if it's a 14-year-old, have that read differently than a 17 or 18-year-old. And we think it's really positive because it's actually teaching teens how to talk to each other directly. And if you think about this in the offline world, if I have a problem, I don't go right to the police. Usually I'll have a conversation with someone around me. And so we're really trying to think thoughtfully about how you foster compassion. And it's an ongoing point of research, and we have a compassion day every year, and Larry and Ann and others have been to it. But we really are trying to focus on the positive and on positive resolution, in addition to some of the tools like reporting to Facebook, which you need sometimes.
So what is the actual emphasis on, or the amount of emphasis on education about cyberbullying or harassment online just within the staff of your companies? Like how much emphasis is put on that?
Kind of varies. I mean, I think that, are you asking how much are we working on educating folks on those issues as opposed to other issues?
Yeah,
Like,
well, not comparatively, but is there a focus on cyberbullying education, either what to do about it, or what stance your company takes on it, or just education on what exactly it is? Is that something that happens?
I think that we all have that in some form. And I would just say that as a sort of general note, I think that sometimes using the term cyberbullying actually weakens
Absolutely.
the activity that's going on, and that it makes it sound as though, well, it's just cyberbullying,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's bullying.
Right.
It is often a carry-on of behavior that's happening offline that then is continuing online on these platforms.
Mm-hmm.
It's, a very, very tiny percentage of the tiny percentage of bullying that we see that is happening only online. So I think that all of us actually have help resources and folks who focus on issues around bullying and making sure that, you know, kids, teens, adults, because adults can bully each other too,
Yeah.
right? It's certainly not restricted to teens. It's the adults behaving badly is quite a thing in and of itself, right? So
absolutely.
I think that I would say that for all of us, not just, you know, okay, here's how you can report bullying, but also here's how you can handle the situation. Here's what you can do as a bystander if you see someone else. Helping communities self-moderate and helping communities set what is an okay and what is okay within their groups. Like, that's something I think all of the different sort of folks here do.
Do we need to? Yeah.
Hi. So I attended the first Safer Internet Day celebration in London 10 years ago, and the concern at that time would be the 3 Ps: porn, predators, and panic. Well, panic and privacy. I suppose there's 4 Ps there. And actually, I want to take a pause for a second. I want to congratulate Ann and Larry and the whole Connect Safely team for a fabulous gathering and a great positive approach to this issue. So I just wanted to say that. We're challenging ourselves to try and answer the question now in 2014, in the era of Facebook and Twitter, but also Snapchat and Kik and all these other extraordinary services. What, for you and for your companies, does online safety mean now? How would you define it? And hopefully it's not just about the 3 or 4 Ps.
So I guess I could start. For us, I think part of it comes back to confidence. So either does the person who is having the user experience or a parent, you know, in this setting, are they confident that the application, the tools, and the experience that they're having is safe? So how do you define safe? In a multiplayer gaming environment, that would be where the level of interaction and the level of behavior is fun, it's in the spirit of gameplay, the context and the intent of the interactions are done in a respectful way, even though it's competitive. And when things cross that line, there are tools and there are processes put in place, like my team, that are going to kind of have my back. Is there anybody on this service, in this case for Microsoft, that has my back? If I do experience something that isn't right, if I do, you know, even witness harassment or become a part of a harassment situation, do I got a way to stop that? Do I have a way to kind of help myself? So part of it is tools, part of it is education, clearly, and part of it is expectations. I'm sure everybody here spends a lot of time developing a code of conduct. So you got this terms of use thing, right? And it's, you know, just like Joe was saying, it's a lot of legalese. Well, we spend a great deal of time building a code of conduct and refining that code of conduct to the unbelievable degree where we just say it's much more plain speak. Look, this is how to be cool to your fellow user. Don't do this stuff. You get people mad at you and you hurt their experience. Part of that is, you know, kind of giving some responsibility to our customers. People generally respond well to that. At least that's our experience.
The one thing I would say that we're very focused on, internally, I would say we're focused on finding the next thing that's coming. So if we see different kinds of behaviors popping up, how do we design tools or responses to that? I would also say externally, I think in terms of how we educate maybe the 5th P, which is parents, or others, is really trying to speak about what's going on in a way that doesn't promote contagion. So one thing that I'm very focused on is the idea, you know, you hear in the media a lot, bullying is an epidemic, or that children are committing suicide because of bullying. And I think one thing we're really focused on is education and really helping people to understand what's actually going on, focus on the positive, how teens are using these platforms to tell their stories and have a voice, and how they're living their lives online the way they often do offline, which is positively, and really trying to bring some credibility to the discussion. It's not always the most credible hearing Facebook talk about safety, but working with others like Connect Safely, with FOSI and others, to really make sure people understand what the actual issues are as opposed to the perception, because I think the perception can be as dangerous. And what we've seen on Instagram, just for as an example, we actually see a rise in what we call self-bullying. So people who set up accounts pretend to bully themselves because they know that this is a way to get attention and help. And that's just as sad as somebody else bullying them. These are people that really need help. But I think that part of the reason you're seeing that is because of the media and the focus on bullying. And so, you know, we just are really, really cognizant of how we talk about this and how we and whom we speak to about it, because I think that's also really important.
Yeah, just, I mean, to kind of handle that in two ways. One, what is our goal with this, these 4 Ps? I mean, I would say, at its like most succinct, we want everyone to be able to express themselves in a way that doesn't harm others without fear of reprisal. Like that is the goal. Like at the end of the day, that's what we're shooting for. And then to the perception issue, certainly, I mean, the actual amount of space that teens are allowed to go without parental supervision has been tightly constrained since the 70s, yet crime rate has gone down. Teen suicide has gone down since the 80s, and yet, again, there are these deep concerns that the internet, and particularly some social platforms, are like fostering this. And that perception is now beginning to lead into unhealthy behaviors to fit into the perceived norms in these scenarios. And so that is kind of what our growing P would be, is perception, because that's driving what the next big wave is.